Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Bridge. I'm a classical and digital accordion player. Very happy to be here today on Talking Blues.
So I'm curious as to the classical title, because I was not really aware of accordion being a classical instrument. And that's probably got more to do with my ignorance than anything else. But when you first started playing accordion, what drew you to that instrument? Was it just the sound? Was it polkas? Was it something else?
Well, that's a good question because accordion dropped in my lap, literally. When I was 5 years old, my mom bought one at a garage sale, brought it home, and a family friend started teaching me. But everyone has a very particular and different accordion story. And mine was that I only knew it as a folk instrument. Maybe I knew a little bit about classical music on accordion, but basically just folk until I was about 15 or 16. And that's when I encountered accordion as a concert instrument per se, where it can sit in front of a symphony orchestra or where you can play Baroque music transcriptions or new music and all of that. So that came later for me, but it wasn't at the beginning that I knew of concert accordion.
So at the age of 15, how did you discover that? What was the circumstances where you were introduced to classical music through the accordion?
So there are several competitions every year that are called the world level accordion competitions. There's about 3 of them, and 2 of them move around from city to city every year, and neither had been in North America for about 25 years. So as a teenager in 2007, one of these big competitions came to Washington, D.C., and I grew up in Calgary. It was nowhere near DC, but at least it was North America. And we thought, okay, let's go. I had lots of friends that were going to go as well, check this thing out and watch the competition. So I competed in the American National and then watched the world level. And that's where I first saw this incredible other type of accordion and other type of playing and really thought, I think I'd like to do that.
Wow. So can I ask you what you were playing in the competition? Like what kind of music was it? And did that basically shift your focus once you saw the classical component of the accordion?
I would say yes. Before that, I was playing tons of folk music, and there's nothing wrong with that.
No.
I do that even to this day on accordion, what I like to call concert arrangements of folk music. And
sorry, can you explain folk music? Because that could be anything, right? And I don't know what your nationality is. If there's a Polish background, that might lend to polka or whatever. Is there any of that? Or
you're right. Yes, there is a heavy European influence on what we accordionists in North America call folk music. So there's a lot of background from, I'll say, Polish, Slovenian, German influence on polkas, a lot of waltzes, a lot of Italian love songs, right. French musettes and fast waltzes and all of that. And then there's also what I'll call Western music, sort of drawing a little bit from country, cowboy style. I'm from Alberta, so there's lots of that around anyways. And dance music from, 1950 and before.
Okay, and in my world, I think of Zydeco music and how much the accordion plays in that.
Very much so. And I only got into Zydeco a little bit later, but yes, that too.
Okay, so when you were going for this competition, what did you play and what were you hoping to accomplish from that experience?
Oh man, I don't think I even remember what I played myself because I was competing in a smaller competition, and I was mainly there to observe and to watch. So I played my folk songs. I remember I played one of my own waltzes. I used to write quite a bit of this music as well.
Oh.
As a teen, and so I played some of my own compositions, But then I was watching these big competitions where there were like 3 rounds, more than an hour of music each contestant had to prepare, um, like and major sonatas, big long 20-minute works, and they were like back to back, a lot of that. So it was pretty intense to watch.
When you said you wrote your own, could I assume that they were instrumentals, or are we
Yeah.
talking with lyrics as well?
No, I haven't written lyrics. You never know. It might happen yet. But
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
they were instrumental.
Okay, and so the fact that you went to the competition, and it sounds like you weren't competing to be the best, or that wasn't the goal.
Not at that point. That came later.
But at what point, at that point, were you thinking that the accordion might be your future in terms of a living that you would make?
I'm glad that you said it that way, because I think it was right around that time that I was doing well as an accordionist, and I wanted to study, I wanted to compete more, like I wanted to play even better. But there's also the whole other element of how do you turn it into a living, and I'm very glad you asked this. I'm super passionate about music business, and helping teenagers to understand how to do that. So when I was about 11, I started playing in retirement homes in Calgary. And slowly this blossomed. By the time I was 15 or 16, I was doing maybe 70 of these a year,
Wow.
which kept me busy. And I mean, I didn't earn a killing, but say a lot of those places, they can pay anywhere from $75 to $150 for somebody to come in and entertain for an hour on an afternoon or evening. So my parents were seeing that I was bringing in at least some income. I started paying for my own music lessons when I was around 16, because I had income from music. And then
Right.
I started to get festival invitations and bigger opportunities. And the decision for me to go into music and my parents supporting it was very much related to the fact that I had income. And they could see that if that kept developing, it could be a genuine career possibility.
Okay, so from a kid who's playing at retirement homes and festivals, doing mainly folk music, and earning some money, and then all of a sudden discovering this world of classical accordion music, which I presume is a completely different thing, because it's not like now you can go to more retirement homes playing
No.
classical accordion music, and it leads you down a completely different path.
Yeah.
Tell me about that adjustment of being a folk accordion player to now thinking I want to concentrate on becoming more of a classical accordion player.
Well, the result was, first of all, that I started attending university around that same time. And coinciding with that, I started several collaborations. One was a group, a quartet that I joined, and another was a duo that I started or co started. And these two groups remain my two groups now, 11 years later, that I've toured with all over the place. So to me, the real key difference was that I started collaborating and I didn't play just on my own anymore. Of course, I do give totally solo recitals still, but that's probably only 1 out of 5 of the things that I do. Most of what I do is playing with a small group or, say, soloing with an orchestra. So in all of these cases, the real key is, I think, accordion with other instruments. It's very powerful. People like it, and they sort of understand how to sell it too as a concert, because it is difficult to convince 1,000 people for a concert presenter, come and hear some guy play accordion solo for an hour or for 2 hours. And
Is there such an animal? Like, are there people out there doing that?
I do that, and some people do that, but it's sort of tougher to sell than come and hear this ensemble. Oh, what's in the ensemble? Well, piano, accordion, percussion, cello. Well, that sounds really cool. Let's go hear that. I'm sure you and your listeners, you just sort of intuitively know what I mean there, where it just people are less sure what to expect from a concert
Right.
accordion, and they love it when they're there, but getting people in the door is actually the tougher problem.
Right. And I've had the privilege of working with La Dome Ensemble, so I
Yes.
know how good you guys
Oh,
are.
thank you.
And it's definitely interesting. And then the duo is more, would it be correct to say it's a little more traditional in terms of more folkish and,
Actually, it's the opposite.
oh, it
My
is. Okay.
duo, because partly I play digital accordion in my duo, and it's with clarinet. So Bridge and Wolak is our name. Bridge and Wolak. And that's I tour the most with Bridge and Wolak. I would describe it as a comedy and music duo, bit reminiscent of Victor Borg for those that know Victor
Oh,
Borg.
really?
Oh yeah, and we really get in each other's face on stage, and everybody likes it.
Is it scripted or is it pretty well improvised?
There is a lot of improvisation, and sometimes I think of a really good joke and I save it for months, and then I drop it on my duo partner while we're on stage. And that's the best way to do it.
This is a clarinet and accordion.
No, no,
And I'm
no.
sorry. Oh, it's not a clarinet.
He just plays clarinet and I'm
Right.
digital accordion. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So, I mean, that's why I thought it was more traditional for some reason. So,
Right.
my
And
mistake.
and it's possible that people come to our concerts thinking that that's going to be the case, and well, they get what we give them. So, but they do tend to love it, and we make everybody have a good time, and we play everything from classical music, Baroque transcriptions, all the way to modern. We do some klezmer, a little bit of polka, just for the diehard fans who really came for that.
Right.
But we try to do everything that people wouldn't expect of those
Okay.
instruments.
So I want to talk about the digital accordion a little bit, but I want to just leave that till the
Mm.
further down the road because I'm more curious as to, establishing yourself as a musician, taking the path of going to university and deciding that you wanted to be a classical accordionist.
Yeah.
When you decide to take that path, what surprised you the most about that journey?
I had identity crises, several of them, for years, because I would still get invited by good friends to go and play at folk music festivals or these awesome polka festivals down in Texas, where you can play on a Friday night for 6,000 screaming drunk people who are just high on life and maybe more than that, and
Right.
they're just having a great time. But in terms of public image, if I'm posting photos of that, and then 2 days later I'm posting photos from a classical recital where I'm trying to be serious, you confuse people. And I was told by many people, you're being confusing. Like, it's great that you can do all of this, but you sort of have to do one thing so that people understand what it is that you're peddling, what is your identity. And I rebelled against that for a long time, saying no, I want to do it all, and not wanting to feel like I had to let go of my previous life as a folk accordionist. And I think that has been resolved slowly. Just I've found ways of playing folk music in real concert arrangements. I describe concert music as any genre of music that is played in such a way that it is worthy of being listened to with focused attention in a soft-seated theater, like, basically in silence.
Right.
Um, that's how I'm using that word right here. And I love doing any genre of music, from Zydeco to rock to classical to Baroque, in that environment and in that aesthetic.
How difficult is it? I mean, having this identity crisis and trying to establish yourself one way or the other, but how difficult is it to be an accordion player? You know what I mean? Like, it's because
Yep.
I think people put that instrument in certain cylinders, as they do in, I guess, with any instrument. but you've obviously touched upon many different genres. How difficult was that to touch upon all and keep that interest?
Well, it's hard on a few levels because yes, people do have everyone has an opinion already as soon as you say I'm an accordionist.
Hmm.
And but different people think that means different things, but everyone surely has an opinion. And then I usually have to self-describe and I would say self-advocate quite a bit more than most instruments in order to say what it is that I do. They're like, people will say, "Oh, you're an accordionist. You play like in living rooms, like house concerts." And I'm like, I mean, occasionally, yes, and I can, but I also play in 2,000 seat theaters for audiences on serious concert series. I play solo in front of orchestras, and they're like, "Really?" I play on stage in operas. I was just at the Met which is the biggest stage on this continent for opera, and they had an accordion role in this new, very difficult contemporary opera, and the accordion was really fully used there. But unless you've seen that opera, you just don't know that it can do that. So there is a slow perception change, but I spend a lot of my time um, trying to change minds about accordion, or just letting people know that where it can go and what people such as myself and many others are doing with it.
So I know that you've attended U of T for many, many years, and you're now a fellow at Rebanks. Um, how difficult was to establish your name as a classical accordionist?
That was weirdly um, only half as hard as one might think. The real difficulty is in actually playing the music. Playing Baroque music, playing contemporary accordion music is really hard on accordion. And you have to be really, really good and work at it for a very long time. And I think using accordion in that way is actually possibly harder than on some other instruments due to the physical, like how the instrument is set up. It can sometimes be working against you, and you have to overcome that. And it's complicated, and there's a lot of stuff going on at the same time. So in order to do that is hard. I was lucky because my professor at U of T, Joseph Massarolo, um, established that program in 1972. And here in Toronto, he has for decades been pushing classical accordion. So he's already done the advocacy work in certain organizations, like all the new music organizations in town. They all know what accordion can actually do. The symphony, yeah. I find big arts organizations now, they are generally aware when I approach them about classical accordion. It's just that the public is still catching up a little bit. So I'm blessed to have had him and others like him who've come before, for the last 50 years, pushing accordion in these arenas. And now my job is to try to take it to the next level.
But how does an orchestra hire you to do a piece? How does that happen? Is that through an agent? Is that through connections?
Yep, it can be through an agent. It can be the easiest way, but it rarely happens, is if they just need an accordion player for an existing piece that they want to play. More often, what happens is that myself or my various agents reach out to an orchestra and say, "Hey, we have this accordionist, and he can play an amazing contemporary concerto by this amazing composer who will sell the show and who's a big name. You should hire him." Or we have this new tango show that Michael and his duo are doing, Bridge and Wolak, and you should buy it. It'll go well on your pop series. So it is basically through pushing.
Do you remember the first time you played in front of an orchestra?
Yes.
Tell me what that was like.
Well, it's a good story because I started right at the top. I got really lucky. It was with the Boston Pops. I was 16 at the time, and it was for this US radio show, From the Top. And they were celebrating 10 years, and it was their 10-year anniversary. So they hired the Boston Pops to be their backup band, as they put it. And they picked 5 young soloists from across North America, and they wanted really interesting people. So they knew about me somehow, and they said, okay, accordion. Well, let's have an accordion soloist with the Boston Pops. For sure, we should do that. So I was just given this opportunity, and I didn't even know at the time what, like, I have to tell you, I didn't even know what that meant. I got off the phone with the guy from the radio show, and then I got off and said, hey, Dad, some guy wants me to play with the Boston Pops. And I figured that Pops meant like a brass band, or like maybe a marching band, or like I didn't even know that meant the orchestra.
Wow.
The Boston Symphony. I had no idea. That's how little I knew about the gig that I was about to do. And then my dad said, you don't, he knew what it meant, but I sure didn't. So, and since then I've been working with other orchestras, basically at trying to play with orchestras of that level again, because I remember the incredible rush.
So what did you play? So this is like a year after you discovered classical accordion.
Yes.
So did you play a classical piece, or was it a non-classical?
It was sort of a classical showpiece. I did Czardas by Vittorio Monti, which is this violin showpiece. It's sort of an encore gypsy style violin showpiece, just adapted to accordion. And that was one of my first performances on a new instrument, the classical accordion, which I had just gotten. So that was a little scary in itself.
How does the volume control work with an orchestra? When you're standing there with an accordion, I mean, I guess the accordion can be loud, but I mean, I don't know how it compares to, 80-piece orchestra behind you, and how well you can hear yourself.
One of my friends describes playing with an orchestra like trying to drag a dinosaur. No offense to all the wonderful orchestras out there, but it's not even just volume, it's the immediacy. So I often do play amplified with orchestra.
Okay.
I prefer the subtle solution of a little speaker under my chair. Then it sounds like all the sound is coming still from me. And then you can just relax and be so much more expressive when you're not fighting for your life continuously. So, but there's also the immediacy, because an orchestra, the conductor will give the beat, and then the orchestra often plays after a little, and they are together, but there's a delay. And accordion is one of the most immediate instruments with the fastest attack of almost any instrument out there. It's so instantaneous. So I had to learn how to actually delay my sound the right amount so that I sounded together with the orchestra. That was an interesting conundrum too.
And I presume as a featured player, you'd be closer to the conductor in the front of the stage than at the back. And my understanding is there's also a difference between the front and the back of the orchestra, that there's a bit of a delay there as well.
Yes. So but I'm lucky at the front. I don't usually have to deal with that, though I'm very much aware of it. And for example, if you want the percussionists who are right at the back and who everybody hears to be immediately with you, the conductor is showing where time is, but we could talk about this for hours. There's also an important relationship between the soloist and their physicality, where people won't see this, but I'm like moving my head up and down right now. I'm expressing with my body moving side to side. And even though they see the back of my head, if I show when I want something to happen, when I'm going to play with my body, then they're able to follow much more easily. Of course, they also follow the conductor, but there's a little bit of a relationship between keeping everything there together, which the soloist has to be a part of. And you use visual cues more than sonic cues, because if they played with my sound, they'd be late.
At what point did you know, and I know it's a lifelong pursuit to be great at any instrument, but at what point did you know that you were good?
That's an interesting question. I would have to answer that in stages, because like I knew I was good at performing in retirement homes when I was
Right.
a teen, but I certainly didn't have the confidence to, lead an orchestra, or even the first, say, 4 or 5 times that I played in front of an orchestra, I was scared stiff. In the whole rehearsal process, I was scared to mess up, that they'd hear me screw up and think that I hadn't prepared enough or whatever. Or um, I guess the feeling of thinking that you're good, not to say it's also very worth being humble, but
Hmm.
just that internal warm fuzzy feeling, I think it comes from confidence and experience. So even though I might have had the finger technique 5 years ago to do some of the things that I do now, I didn't have the internal confidence because I hadn't tried it in many different settings. And I think it really does come from that. People are often not the best at evaluating their own abilities. We either
Hmm.
overinflate our abilities on certain things. Like you ask everybody, do you think you're an above average driver? And 70% of people will say yes. Like, cannot be true. So,
Right.
or we tend to undervalue, which a lot of artists do. We think, well, I'm not the greatest pianist of all time, therefore I must suck.
Did you ever think about not doing this? Did you ever question the pursuit of being a professional accordionist?
I think as in my teens, I did. I questioned playing accordion. I also played piano growing up. So I remember 2 or 3 times that I wanted to quit each instrument. Luckily, I had parents who gently pushed me to continue. They said, well, you've gone this far. Why not be really good at, like, just keep going. You're close. Or just keep gently pushing. And I'm grateful for that. But yeah, I certainly did want to quit sometimes. But once I got into being a professional artist, I don't think I've had any like serious doubts about being in the arts, because luckily I've been able to continue making money, at least enough at certain points. Certain points years ago, it was slim. But I've managed to carry on, and now I'm sort of getting to the stage where people are calling me a lot, which is a real privilege and pleasure, but it does make it easier.
Yeah, for sure. So now, at what point you decide to take on the digital accordion, and based on what I've seen you demonstrate, I mean, it's a well. No, actually, before we do that, tell me about your accordion, because I don't think a lot of people get a chance to see how big it is and how heavy it is. It requires a lot of work. And then what I noticed when working with you was that your accordion does not have the keyboard as I'm used to, and it has buttons instead. Tell me a little bit about the makeup of your accordion.
So exactly, it does have buttons on both sides of slightly different sizes, and in a slightly different pattern, because of course they couldn't make it the same pattern on both hands. Like, that would just be too straightforward. But the reason why it is the way that it is that over the centuries, adaptations were progressively made to accordion design, and it sort of got entrenched the way that it is. But anyways, that's beside the point. So it's 35 pounds. It opens wide. I have a wingspan of maybe 4 feet, and 106 buttons on the right and 120 on the left. So there's lots to choose from.
And when you look at it, like, it doesn't really make sense. It's not like a keyboard layout. I mean, there's a lot of buttons,
Right.
and I'm sure it makes sense to you. But as I watch it, I think, what the heck is going on?
Sometimes I split my accordion in half when I'm traveling on the plane, and I send the right-hand section through the X-ray machine at security, and they often ask me, is that a typewriter? Because there's all the buttons. It really does look like a typewriter. And then all the buttons are connected on levers at a 90-degree angle that open the valves. And it really looks like the whole mechanism inside a typewriter. So that'll give people a bit of a picture.
Okay, moving parts inside. It's a complicated instrument. Tell me
More
about that.
more moving parts than a grand piano, and you have to hold it on your lap. So inside, and now for any harmonica fans who are following this podcast, the blues, accordion on the inside is like a bunch of giant harmonicas. And instead of the human lungs, we have the bellows, but it's the same principle, open and close. So they have actually two different reeds for the open and the close. And I have the ability to link multiple reed blocks together. So think of it as like if you could stack 4 harmonicas and hold them and play them all at the same time with your mouth, it's the same thing that I'm doing
That's
on
a big
accordion.
mouth.
Yeah, big mouth. So that once you add up all those reeds, there are 840 individual reeds inside my accordion. Because for every note, there's 4 or 5 different reeds that can be activated.
Okay, as a player, how much? Like, I think I heard that you had to go to Italy to get it tuned.
Yeah.
Okay, so as a player, how much maintenance goes into this on a regular basis, and do you have to go back to Italy to get it fully tuned? Is that the only way of getting this done?
There are people in North America, even within the Toronto area, who do tune and who do maintenance. Though I needed a total overhaul, and I wanted to go to Italy as well. And the makers are the most skilled people at doing, technical repairs and all of that. So I did take it back. It had been 5 years. You only need to get it tuned maybe every 3 years if you're playing full time, but it does take a week to tune it. So it's lucky that you don't have to do it that frequently.
So at what point do you know, or like 4 years into it, and you think, I got to get back there and get it tuned or maintained? I mean, what's it playing like? Is there things that you can do to tune it or to
Yep.
to perform?
I mean, two things. I do tune a little bit myself, spot tuning. And so if one reed really goes out, I can fix that. But it was getting to the point, as the pandemic was dragging on, I didn't want to go over to Italy initially, and then that was the delay. But it was to the point where sometimes I would not use certain reed banks because they sounded out of tune. So it's like in my 4 harmonicas that I'm holding, I only play 2 of them because I don't like the other 2. And they're basically just adding weight to the instrument. But of course, you lose sound, you lose tonal possibilities if you're not able to use the whole machine.
I presume it's like any other instrument that another accordionist picks up your instrument, it's going to sound quite different.
Yes.
What gives it that tone? Like, what gives you your individual tone, if that's the right word, or your individual sound? Is it all of it? All of the squeezing, the pushing, like what identifies you as the player, the sound that you make?
That's a good question. It's not like brass. Like on brass, if you have a different person playing, like the whole mouth oral cavity actually makes the instrument sound different. It's not quite
Right.
that different, but it would be similar to like 2 different pianists playing the same piano, where by how you use your body, how you the key difference comes down to the bellows. How do you operate the bellows? How smoothly do you pull them? How loud do you play? And how do you control the instrument as it's moving, and in particular when it's big? And a lot of technique goes into, as you expand the instrument with your left arm, you also have to expand your left leg under it. Otherwise, you'll sort of fall over or you'll twist your back. So supporting the instrument that whole way out and then back in and making that turnaround at the end is quite difficult. And that's something that everyone works on and sort of develops their own sound. And some accordionists play, I'll call it very smooth bellowing. Like they just use the bellows to pull straight. Others play very accented, where they sort of jerk the bellows a little bit to start every note. I call that like a ping aesthetic. And then some other accordionists, myself included, as a product of my professor teaching me this, we actually move the bellows out, but we also go forwards and backwards, introducing a second dimension. And not that curving the bellows changes the sound, it doesn't, but moving your body in this particular way uses different muscles. It means that you can create different sounds if you use different muscles. It gives you more variables. So the knowledge of what to do with your body and what aesthetic are you going for, the choices that you make, are what leads to a different sound. Even if somebody else picked up my accordion, that's why we would sound different.
Do you know, was there a point where you realized that you knew what your sound was?
I think that is evolving. I mean, I know what my sound is now, but it won't be the same in 2 years. Not exactly.
Right. Okay, so the instrument is 35 pounds in weight. You have a 4-foot span. I presume you got to be in pretty good shape to be playing this on a regular basis and putting on shows that are of some length.
Yes.
How do you keep in shape? Is it just a matter of practicing on a regular basis, or is there a physical element to keeping in shape to play the accordion?
Yeah, very good question. I do a lot of stretching every day. Not because I remember to, but because my body tells me that I need to. I can feel it in my lower back. I spend a great deal of energy trying to play very efficiently and to use the least amount of strength. I used to, in my lower 20s, I would go to the gym a lot and really try to be super strong so that I could just punish this instrument and, and move it however I wanted. And I still walk all the time. I do a lot of general physical things, though I don't currently work out a great deal. Like, I'm not a daily weightlifter or anything. But practicing does keep you strong, but I'm focused on using the least energy to accomplish and keep it and getting rid of any tension through stretching and through not making tension in the first place.
How much does breathing come into this?
A lot. The key is to breathe.
Oh yeah, that's important.
The key is to not stop breathing, because often a friend of mine did this experiment. He put like a little head-worn microphone, and he'd been working on relaxation while playing for like 10 years. And he thought, oh, I'm sure that I breathe, but I'm just going to check. And then he was practicing, and basically he didn't even know, but he was basically going the whole way through, not only holding his breath, but like humming and doing all sorts of things as he was playing. So then he was like, okay, I really have to focus on this. And he was already trying to be focused on this. So like, to keep the breath going, the human breath, not in sync with the accordion breath. It's not like 1-to-1, but there can be sort of this polymetry where you're taking a breath and it's every 2 or 3, and then it's 1-to-4. And there's sort of a little bit of a changing ratio to how many human breaths to accordion breath, but just keep going is the main idea.
Okay, so I want to ask about what your right hand does and what the left hand does, mainly because I want to ask about, more importantly, when you convert it to digital accordion. But right now, on the acoustic accordion, what's the difference? What's the function of left and right hand?
Well, on my concert accordion, they are fairly similar in that they both have full range. In theory, I could play the bass on either hand and the high notes on either hand. This is different from a folk accordion that basically can only play melody on one hand, on right hand, with the keyboard if they have a keyboard, or buttons if they have buttons. And then the left hand, the one that's moving the bellows, is usually limited to just playing preset chords, and it can't really participate actively. It doesn't have the full range. So my concert accordion, what makes this different is it has full range on both hands. So it's best thought of as a two manual organ where both keyboards have everything. Now, that being said, we do usually play the melody on the right hand and the bass on the left hand. And the reeds are a little bit different, where like my bass reeds on the left hand, even though they are the same pitch, they are fatter reeds and they sound deeper and more substantial. So they sort of make the accordion well suited to doing that, but you can actually do it the other way around if you want.
One can imagine that in the way of the piano, that
Right.
you're playing bass with one hand and higher notes with the other. So when I watch you play the digital accordion, it's mind-boggling to me because I see that one hand is doing maybe the lead parts, but the other hand could be doing rhythm, or it could be doing percussion,
Yes.
or guitar. Like it's so like. Tell me about the digital accordion. What attracted you to it? And then I would imagine starting to play the digital accordion is like almost relearning the instrument. Is that correct?
It is. It takes years to adapt to that and to make that your voice, or to learn how to use it as one of your voices. Digital accordion, so it looks almost the same, but instead of reeds and these big harmonicas inside, it's just computers and sensors and speakers. So there's a sensor in the bellows that senses how hard am I pulling or pushing. And then every button has a pressure sensor under it that knows how hard do I hit the button and when.
At its very basic, if you decide to use your digital accordion exactly the same way as you're playing your concert accordion, and because you said it reacts the same way, can you make it sound and feel exactly the same as what with both instruments?
Yeah, you can. If I turn on accordion sounds
Right.
on both hands, the appropriate ones, then more or less it can act as an acoustic accordion. It does sound a tiny little bit different. The response is different and all of that, but basically it can be an acoustic accordion, just how a digital piano, you can put on a piano sound. In fact, usually people do, and they imitate a piano. So it's about as similar as that. Not quite the right, not exactly the same sound, but same function.
Okay, so it's relatively a new instrument, the digital accordion.
Yeah.
When it first came out, what attracted you to it, and what did you think you were going to accomplish with the digital accordion?
Well, to be honest, it took me a few years to get on board. I was resistant for a while because, and here's the difficulty. When you first push the power, you take it out of the box, you push the power button and you start to play. The factory preset sounds are underwhelming. I'm going to put it that way. And in order to make the instrument sound great, a lot of people, myself particularly, we spend a lot of time customizing the sounds that are inside the accordion. And then number two is that's not enough. You can't just program it to sound in a certain way. You actually have to adapt what you do with your body in order to, basic example, like if I put on a saxophone sound, but if I use my body like an accordion, it's not going to sound like a saxophone. You have to capture the phrase shapes, the right note length, in order to sort of sound like a saxophone.
How are you capturing that? Are you recording a real saxophone and modifying that, or how?
No.
What happens there?
So there are companies that do this professionally. It's called sampling, where they will record with microphones all over an instrument, and they'll sample a flute, sample a piano, an organ, or whatever. And they'll also develop imaginary sounds too, just computer-based sounds only. That then you can take these samples and load them into the accordion and then map them to the keys so that now basically I have a flute sound there or an imaginary whatever sound. So that's sort of the process. And I've spent now a great deal of time programming my own sound combinations, which I actually sell now to other digital accordionists to save them that time, because it takes a few years to sort of figure out the programming side of it and how to make the sound combinations somewhat logical. So I do a lot of that work and I sell it to others, but then I also adapt it further just for me as well. So there's a
Okay.
big learning curve.
Yeah, and it's crazy to me when I watch this, you in action using the different sounds. So an example would be you'd be playing something, and on one hand you're playing an accordion type instrument, the lead, and on the other hand you have notes that are actual guitar strings, I think, like
Yeah.
an acoustic guitar, while other notes have drum sounds,
Yes.
snare, bass, or hi hat. And it's just mind boggling to me that now you're not just playing one instrument that's difficult, but now you're playing multiple instruments in one hand, controlling different sounds. I can't imagine how your brain changes to adapt to that.
It takes time. It surely takes time. The first key to learn how to do on the accordion is to learn how to separate volume control of two different sounds. So on my left hand, I might turn on a sound that is sensitive to the bellows, meaning if I pull harder, it gets louder. But at the same time, so if you were playing acoustic accordion, you just pull louder, you pull harder, and the entire instrument gets louder. There's no
Right,
separation. But
right,
on digital, you can pick one of the hands to link it to the bellows, and the other one you might link to finger velocity. So if I strike harder with my fingers, it gets louder. The bellows don't do anything to that sound anymore. So if you set up just any two sounds, like let's say piano and strings, piano on one hand, strings on the other. Strings, you're going to link it to the bellows because strings can get louder within a note.
right.
Piano is all finger attack. So you have to learn. And initially, I love watching people doing this the first time because they're trying to make the piano louder by pulling harder on the bellows, or vice versa. And they get it wrong, but you have to learn how to do that on the fly to know, okay, I hit the button, I'm halfway through a piece, hit the button, bring in a new instrument, and immediately know, how do I control it? Is it bellows or is it hand or what? And usually I'm doing both at the same time with different sounds. So yeah, you do have to learn that new skill that is not present on digital on acoustic accordion.
So, how has it changed your acoustic accordion playing once you've I probably have mastered is probably not the right word for it, but once you've gotten to a very comfortable place with your digital, where your brain is thinking differently in terms of what one hand is doing and the buttons that it's playing, like has it changed at all, or are you able to just say my brain is now on digital and or my brain is now on acoustic?
Well, I switch a lot and I play both. So I am pretty fast at switching brain space, but it's for sure that doing all this time on digital has affected how I think about playing on acoustic. I think the main way is probably that now that I can literally orchestrate on digital and play multiple instruments at once, I am able to think about that even better when I play on acoustic accordion. And we do talk about orchestrating and playing different parts and trying to bring them both out on acoustic accordion, but you can go so much further on digital that when I come back to acoustic, I'm really craving that total separation. I think also I've noticed that like I like to add more low octaves. They're not in the music, and I just play deeper bass notes. I add a lower octave on acoustic because I crave the epicness of being able to play bass guitar or like full orchestra sound with one instrument. Once you've experienced that, you don't want to be just a small sound anymore. You want everything to be epic. So I do add a lot more octaves. I play longer bass notes. I change the music. And I do that quite a bit on acoustic. And I think it comes from the influence of digital on my preferences.
Do you see, I mean, I presume you see great potential where this instrument can take you and the kind of music that you can make. Is that something that's huge? Like when you look forward to the kind of music you'll be doing 5 years from now, is can the instrument take you anywhere you want to go?
The combination of the two, I think, can take me anywhere I want to go. So we've talked about what the digital brings, but we should also talk about what it's missing. And because the acoustic has that the digital doesn't. And it's the same as on other acoustic digital, like a keyboard versus a piano, a 9-foot
Right.
grand on stage. No combination of speakers is ever going to sound exactly the same as a 9-foot grand, because the shape of the sound emitter is different. It just works differently, and that's okay. So when I want an accordion sound, I go usually acoustic accordion. There's also little things like you can half close a valve on an accordion, just the same as on a harmonica. You can sort of, I don't know how they do that. Maybe they back off of the hole that you're blowing into just a little bit to bend the note. You can do that on acoustic, and it doesn't work on digital. The sound is on or off. So there are little things about expression that are just different. And I don't want to say that one is better or more exciting, because I'm passionate about them both. And I think this is what it is to be a musician in the 21st century. There's a certain amount of fusion of acoustic tradition and digital technology. Even if you don't play a digital instrument, maybe you edit your own videos, or you record from home. Like, this is what it is now to be a musician. You have to deal with using technology as part of your artistic craft. And I try to embrace that. I don't think about whether or not that's a good thing for the world. I just use the new tools that are there.
The other thing that you do is you have sort of like a mentoring program for younger musicians.
Yes.
How did that come about?
Oh, well, that was during the pandemic when we had like an inbox full of 80 concert cancellations. Thought, okay, what are we going to do? So this was with my duo, Bridge and Wolak, and the eventual output of that brainstorming was the Bridge and Wolak Music Mentorship Program. It's an online program for high school aged students, can be anywhere, and we help them explore different career paths in the arts: performing, teaching, sound engineer, lighting technician, arts administrator, music cognition specialist, scientist, fashion designer for musicians. So we interviewed a bunch of these different representatives and filmed beautiful interviews at the Isabel Bader Center, where I'm sure you've worked, in Kingston. Gorgeous concert hall. And actually, that was my entry into video editing, because I got to do all of those. So made it through there, and that brings me tremendous respect for what you do as an editor. So we made that program, and then we started running it online and showing different career options to all these youth. And it was super fulfilling during the pandemic, when we were all locked up at home, to try to keep them thinking towards their future. And the best part were some of the questions that they asked. Like, I remember an entire afternoon where one student opened with the question, how do I know if I'm an artist? And we're like, okay, let's go deep. And they really did want to go deep into the philosophy of how do you actually find evidence of that and work that out in a way that helps you to build your conscious identity of who you are. I think a lot of students who are teenagers, they are unconscious artists. They like artistic things, but they can't say why they are an artist in words,
Right.
like to declare it, um, and to cite evidence of that. But if what we told them is look in your drawer, look in your notepad on your phone. Did you shoot a video of your friend? Did you uh, agonize over getting the right camera angle? Did you make your family listen to you play a piece on guitar in the living room? Like, what is the tangible evidence of you sharing the ideas in your head with the outside world? And if you are doing that in any kind of regular basis, and if you feel the need to get it out, and we encourage you to get it out, put it on paper or put it in a recording or perform it, like get it out. That is what is the fundamental nature of an artist. Somebody who has an idea and has to share it.
So now that your calendar is starting to fill up again and you're starting to travel more, is that mentorship program still ongoing? And if so, where do people find out about it?
Thank you for asking. You go to Bridge Wolak, that's with a W, bridgewolak.com / music mentorship program, or you can just click the link. It's right there, obvious on the website. We run it usually about once a year now, because we are pretty busy on the road, but we're trying to keep up with this too and do mentorship sessions because it's really important. And we get a lot from doing it, a lot back psychologically.
I need to wrap this up, but tell me about going forward. What's happening in the next year, and what are your goals coming up?
Well, at the moment, I am moving forward with a couple of orchestral projects that we/I developed during the pandemic. My duo has a new show with the orchestra called Tangorium. That's starting to book all over North America. So about a year from now, we'll be touring with that show. Then solo, I've played a number of concertos recently that I would like to play many more times. So I did that here in Toronto. I'll be taking some of those concertos on the road. I'm also starting to teach quite a bit more, both business of music lectures and accordion. I'm doing master classes all over the place at the European conservatories and trying to bring students here to the University of Toronto program. So eventually my life will look more teaching based, but for now it is still more performing based. So I'm embracing that and happy to be back out on the road and making new music and trying to figure out new ways of using both of these instruments.
I'm curious, the idea that at one point or another it will be more teaching based. Why that decision? Is it just you're tired of touring? Is it that you get more out of teaching students? Or tell me the mindset behind that.
I enjoy them both. I love performing and the challenge, and I genuinely do love the challenge of always having to put the next tour together, or to get the next booking, or to go a level up and play at a bigger stage somewhere and all of that. But it is a really big challenge, and it takes a lot of hours to put together.
Mm-hmm.
I'm almost back up at 90, 100 concerts a year now, in like 20 provinces and states, 2 European tours per year. Putting that all together is just 24/7, and then actually doing it as well and putting it together. It's not just me, but I'm working with a team. But it's a lot, and it's not only the constant pressure, but it's also there is instability in constant gig work, and with a family in later life, I may not want that. I may not have quite the same go get it as I do now. So I'm sort of expecting that to happen, and that's why I did a doctorate sort of on the side, so to speak, partly during the pandemic, because I wanted that qualification in order to be able to teach at it and have a university professorship in the long run. Touring is not for everyone, and I teach this in courses and like how to try to do it, but it's a mindset and it's a lifestyle, and you really do have to love it. And even then, it is a difficult fight to turn and to advocate for an instrument such as mine, a fringe instrument, and then to turn that into thousands of dollars in the bank. Well, here's something interesting I could share with you, if you don't mind.
No, not at all.
Because I talk about this a lot. It's a payment model for musicians. So let's say that let's just accept as given that I am one of the most skilled people doing what I do on this continent, one of the most qualified, et cetera, et cetera. If that were true in another industry, I could probably get $100,000 salary. Let's just say that I should earn $100,000 and start from that end and then work backwards. So I have to cover certain marketing costs. I have to, buy equipment and all of that. So let's say it actually needs to be 130 income, because if I worked for a company, they would be paying for the air conditioning.
Right.
So we need to make 130,000, and I want to do that in 70 concerts, let's say. Maybe some teaching on the side. And then there might also have to be some travel expenses. But it's close to $2,000 if you just look at that math net per performance, like after travel expenses, that I have to make per night in order to do 70 shows a year and walk away with $100,000 at the end of the year. So when people offer you a show for $500 or like a close gig, and they think, oh, you're making 500 in a night, and like that's really good, or you make 1,000 in a night, or 2,000. No, 2,000 is not good. That's minimum wage for somebody like me in order to, achieve the financial goals that I would like to achieve, and that I would easily achieve if I was in a different field. So I bring this up because it's a way of reframing to us musicians maybe a different money mindset. I wish I made $2,000 a night every time that I performed or more. I don't. Spoiler alert.
But I wonder, when you teach this, I mean, you've been at this for a while, and you've established a name and a certain reputation.
Yes.
And you've put in the years of work. A newer artist can't go in with the same thing because they have to pay their dues.
Yes.
And accept gigs that are less paying just to get their name out there.
Absolutely.
How do you justify that? Like, how do you teach that to the students?
Well, I remember for years I remember 30,000. The first time that I earned 30,000 in a year, because that's where HST kicks in. And you may know, as like a self-employed person, you have to watch out, because when you're above 30,000, you have to be charging HST. And up until then, I hadn't charged tax.
Right.
So I was like watching that one pretty closely. And then when I went past that, but all of that to say, I remember when I was making for sure less than that. I was like a first or second year undergrad student, and I was focused on the student days. And if you can get scholarships and just figure out how to get by as a student with minimal expenses, and you're not saving for the future, you're not trying to invest in your retirement, none of that, then you can certainly earn much less, and you can probably average $200 or $500 if it's a larger project. But you do have to understand what is the actual goal and what does it take from the end result first, and then building backwards. What would it take for me to, earn a competitive salary? And it doesn't have to be 100K, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, for sure.
Just trying to rethink how to think about money as a musician.
Let me close with this final question. Tell me about the relationship that you have with your accordion. What is that relationship?
It's very personal, because accordion is a very close instrument. It is on you. It's heavy. You feel it. It's like someone sitting on you. And then the straps go around your back and they latch up at the back. It's like someone giving you a hug as you play. And you can feel it vibrating against you. So there's a lot of physical interaction that I'm no longer really aware of, and because I'm just used to it. But when somebody first puts an accordion on, it's a lot. It's a very dynamic experience because it's heavy and it's there, and it's so my accordion and I, to your question, beyond the physical things, we've been through a lot together. I remember like difficult moments where I was struggling to learn a piece and not enough time for this new contract, and getting through those things. And I've tried to take care of it. I tune it whenever possible. I invest in new accessories if I think it'll make it better. And I just did. I'm trying to always improve the sound. So it's a relationship where I take responsibility for it, not quite like a child, but almost like a child, where you are trying to make it better and to grow with it. And you remember where you've been. And once you've been doing it for, let's say, 5 years, or any time past 5 years, you can think back to the old days, you know?
Right.
6 years ago or 11 years ago, or soon I'll be able to think back 20 years of doing this, so that it becomes personal and it becomes storied as well. I would have a hard time letting go of this accordion.
I'm sure. But you don't have to, right?
No, I don't.
Michael, thank you so much for doing this. I got the chance to watch you play a few times, and it's something to behold, and it certainly has redefined what an accordion is to me. And thank you so much for what you do.
My pleasure, and can't wait to see. And if I can plug the videos that we just shot together, because those will be coming out in probably spring 2023, I imagine.
Okay.
I hope people will be able to see those from Kerner Hall with Riddle Films and Mako doing an amazing video editing job on those, and I can't wait to see them.
Well, we'll see about that.
Well, yeah, it could be crap, you know.
We'll see. But thank you so much. Thank you for doing this.
My pleasure. Thank you.